Hey everyone, and welcome to 121 Overload. I am Peter, that is Matt, and we talk about movies on this show. And this is our monthly movie show, Overload. This is we do once a month, and it is one that is voted for by our patrons. Every month, Matt picks a movie he loves, I pick a movie I love. We put them to a vote on patreon.com/BelfastTV, and our patrons decide which one we're going to end up doing. And sometimes our differences in taste will clash, and sometimes they will not. It just kind of depends on what happens. Was it last month? Yeah, last month we had
last time.
Last month we had a very pleasing one where we both liked the movie. We'll see how this one works out. But this month's movie ended up being the winner of Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, which is the first in the Chan-wook Park Vengeance trilogy from Korea. And this was my pick. I won after a streak of like 3 Matt wins in a row. I finally got a victory, which I am pleased dearly by. So that is what we're going to talk about. We'll start spoiler free as we always do, and we'll give you a warning before we dive into spoilers. So, what is Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance? Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is a film about a deaf man and his sister. His sister is sick. He cannot afford to pay for her hospital bills. She's needing a kidney transplant, and he comes into some bad luck, which we'll save for spoiler talk. But ultimately, his girlfriend convinces him to kidnap the child of a relatively rich person, his boss, in fact, his boss, and they have no real ill intentions, but things kind of go wrong. Things go down a dark path, and ultimately there is a cycle of vengeance that happens from multiple points of view. And the film kind of jumps between 2 protagonists. The boss character is also kind of the other main character, who is largely kind of you see glimpses of him for the first like half, and then he becomes more of a main character in the second half. It kind of does this thing where it flips between them, and that's kind of the movie. And I think a lot of the plot later on is definitely very spoilery, so I think we'll be avoiding plot until we get to spoilers. But that is what I'll tell you for spoiler free. And I'm going to ask the question that I always ask after giving the brief premise. Matt, well. In this show, I don't always ask it, because in this show, if it's the one you picked, then there's no point in asking it. But in this case, I'll ask it. Matt.
But I always, in case it's a time you do win, I do ask you.
Yeah.
Just for clarity.
Yeah.
You know.
But in this case, Matt, did you enjoy Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance?
Not really. No. And Asian cinema is a blind spot of mine. I haven't seen a lot of it. I've seen classics from like Kurosawa. And I'd seen Old Boy, this is the same director, and so yeah, I don't have a lot to base it off of, but just as a movie, as a thriller, I am a fan of thrillers. There's a lot that didn't work for me. So the story, though, I do enjoy the story and what it says. It was just the execution of said story wasn't my kind of thing.
It's definitely got a unique quirkiness to it. There's definitely things that happen, we'll say, out of left field that I think is partly why I love it. It's one of the things that I love about, and I think I'd attribute this to specific. I mean, other countries have cinema like this too, but I feel like this is something I really think of when I think of Korean cinema. Is the ability to have like a super serious dark movie, and this is a super serious dark movie. This goes dark places, and yet somehow it manages to have this kind of quirky sense of humor almost the entire time. Like,
yeah, and so, but I feel like I've seen other movies that have done it well. So like, I Saw the Devil. I feel like that gets slapsticky in parts.
it does. It does.
So. And so I can appreciate a good dark comedy moment in an otherwise kind of. This wasn't bleak, but I don't have a better word. It's just everything is going bad for everybody as this movie goes on, and it's.
Oh, it's a tragedy. I mean, that's the quick way of saying it. It's an outright tragedy. Obviously, I love it. I picked it. I think. Obviously I enjoy the plot, but I actually think the execution of the plot is what actually makes it for me. It's the way scenes. There's very little music. When there is music, it's typically source music.
It's deliberate
in the scene.
Yeah.
I think there's like one moment of proper score music towards the end, but other than that, I feel like the absurdity of all the moments is really portrayed. That's kind of the point of the way it's shot, is that you sit in the awkward scene, and you kind of let the just the outrageous nature kind of like soak in for not for just for you but for the characters, and you're just kind of sitting there and like, wait, this is really happening. What's going on? And you're kind of like just in it like that. It's kind of in the same way that this is a weird thing to compare it to, but you know how like The Office's whole shtick, you know, the TV show The Office was, oh, it's not just comedy in the classic sense, it's comedy in the sense of like Michael Scott will say something really inappropriate, and everyone in the room will be sitting there awkwardly. But that's kind of what makes it funny. It's kind of
it's cringe-based comedy.
Yeah. Well, this isn't quite that, because it's not a comedy, even though there is quirky, funny elements. But it's kind of that, but for a thriller where you're sitting there, and some of the moments are just downright. It's like it embraces the absurdity of the extreme sort of revenge and the plot that's going on. In fact, even the same way that the hit television show Buffy the Vampire Slayer, that's got a very famous episode called The Body, and I won't spoil things for anyone who's not got there, but I will say it deals with death, that episode, but it deals with death in a very realistic way where it focuses on the boredom of death, where after someone dies, there's a lot of boredom of waiting around in hospitals or waiting around for information or waiting around to see what you can do next. And I feel like this is, again, it kind of does that, but for this really weird, bizarre revenge story where it's like, let's focus on the absurd situations that these characters are getting into and feel the awkwardness of it and feel the mix of that, but also the extreme kind of loneliness and desolation. Because I think another big part of this movie is alienation. Like, obviously, the main character being dead.
Yeah, that's probably a better word than bleak. It has a sense of alienation and solitude to it.
Yeah.
Amongst all the characters, not even, not one in particular. It spreads, throughout. But yeah.
Yeah, they're all alienated for different reasons as well. And I think the other thing I like about it, it's just it's got that really simple. I mean, before you start analysing, before you start looking into like the deeper things that are going on, it is a very simple tale of violence begets violence, revenge just begets more revenge. It's a vicious cycle that just kind of keeps spilling and escalating. And I think some people will watch this. You'll have your prudish people who will watch this go, oh, this is absurdly dark for the sake of being dark, or this is doing horrible things. I once showed this to a friend who got really uncomfortable and had to leave the room at one point. Which to me is a sign of success, because to me that's making people feel things. That's working.
Well, as I bring up anytime I can talk about Old Boy, that movie still makes me feel like I will never watch that movie again because I still remember the visceral reaction of things during that movie.
I've seen Old Boy many a time. I love Old Boy.
But yeah, so I get that and I understand watching stuff. I wish, it's called a thriller, and that to me I associate with like a thrill ride. I'm a big roller coaster rider, and that comes from a lot of, for me, you want ups and downs and twists and turns. And while I felt like there was a lot of twists and turns here, the ups and downs, it was kind of flat for me. So
I mean, I think that's kind of a weird criticism to me, because I feel like you're criticizing the people who are labeling it with a genre rather than what the movie's doing on its own, if that makes any sense.
Well, yeah, but I go in thinking like, I know this director's, what he's worked on. I'm familiar with some of his work. So I go in expecting, and it, the movie just kind of happens. I mean, the first hour, I felt like, okay, well, when's stuff gonna get going? So, and then it's really the second hour that it really becomes that kind of thriller that moves and stuff's happening more than, sitting around with the characters and seeing their daily life.
Well, it's just funny because I actually think the first hour's just as riveting, but just in different ways. Because I feel like again, talking about the absurdity and like kind of like being in these weird situations, I think the first half is kind of like, because obviously once you get to the second half, everything keeps escalating and everything kind of like has a knock-on effect from what's happened before. And what I like about the first half is that it takes the character of Ryu, the deaf guy who's trying to like get a kidney for his sister, and it takes him, and it's like, it makes you like him, it makes you sympathise with him, and you don't think of him as an evil person, so anything that he does later on that obviously seems evil to other characters, you actually kind of like you understand where he's, even though you don't necessarily agree with what he's done, and you don't necessarily think that you would ever do the same thing in that situation. It gives you this this personal escalation for him, where he's almost not even like, he's almost convinced into doing things from other people at certain points.
Yeah.
He's kind of along for the ride, and then before it's too late, he realizes, oh crap, I've done all this stuff, and I can't take it back. And it's like this big, like, you know, because a big part of the, again, going back to the violence begets violence, is that he does kind of initiate something, and even then, he's kind of motivated by someone else's horrible act that happens to him early on, which is also a sort of really darkly funny kind of moment in its own way. But the first half, it kind of deals with that not realizing you're doing something really awful until it's too late kind of thing. Because you can kind of see it going down the cliff. You can just kind of see it teetering at the edge, and he's blissfully unaware, which is a big part of his character, because him being deaf plays into that, where he's unaware of his surroundings, and it's kind of a metaphor for the fact that he's not really paying attention to it. He's not a bad guy. He's you know, there's a scene early on where he helps this sort of this homeless guy who sits with his pants down, and he goes up and helps him and puts him on, and you see that he cares about his sister, but he's so...
Well, it's the old cliche of the path to hell is paved on good intentions.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, so, you know, and that's his exact thing, because I don't ever identify him as the bad guy. Like, there are characters in this movie that definitely are the bad guys.
And the funny thing is up until a certain point, is you think his boss, who he kidnaps the girl from, you kind of see him as the bad guy in the first half of the movie, until things shift. Very, what's the word I'm looking for? Dramatically shift. That's the word I was looking for. But like, things shift so much, and then you're on his side, you're on his sympathy. Hence the title, "Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance." It's the perfect title in a lot of ways. Like, you can't fault it.
Although I did a little research, and the original title translates to "Vengeance is Mine."
Really,
and I kind of like that too. Yeah, so I mean, both titles work. But that one, because that could be literally talking about any one of the characters.
I think I like Sympathy more just because it sounds more unique. Like, I think Vengeance is Mine sounds like, you know, any vengeance movie, any revenge movie could be called that.
True.
Whereas Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance, I feel like it really, because it very much is a movie of two characters, and they're sort of dead set against each other, but you completely understand each points of view. You understand why each one like is the way they are and why they need to do what they're doing. Even if you think that sometimes the choices made are stupid, or the choices made are, don't want to say immature, but rash.
Misguided.
They're not thinking things through. They're not doing this. They're acting purely on their emotions. And I think that's one of the things. Like, just the shock of certain events throughout. I think the emotion of like certain tragedies is played extremely well. And again, you have that feeling where you're just the car is teetering over the cliff. And there is a point about halfway through where it goes flying off the cliff, and you know there's going to be consequences. And then it's almost just this gut-wrenching thing for the rest of the movie of like these consequences playing out, and like, oh, where does this go? And again, it plays it very well where you have sympathy for both sides, and I think that's first and foremost what I love about it. There's a lot of simple little touches, and there's some good directing tricks in there that I really like as well. But that's and. Yeah, so, and again, going back to the alienated thing, Ryu, beyond being deaf, and not that the people don't dye their hair, or this isn't common, but he has green hair, he has bright green hair.
And in crowd scenes, he really sticks out.
Yeah,
you know?
he is, what's the word I'm looking for? He sticks out, basically, is the way to put it. But, so no, but I love it a lot. And there's not a whole lot of violence, but when the violence does kick in, it is beautifully what's the word I'm looking for? It is beautifully visceral.
Yeah, that's Chan-wook Park, the director. Like, that's what I always associate with him, is that. So he knows how to shoot a visceral, bloody.
You'll go 90 minutes without any violence, and then there'll be so much blood in one scene that it's made up for the entire film. Like, that's basically what happens. Basically what happens. So I think everything has impact, and we've come back to this before, but you not liking like bad feelings, and I love bad feelings in movies because
That's. I mean, it's not necessarily that because, again, I familiar with the director. The title kind of primes you for that.
you
Things
went
are
going
going
and
to get
thinking, oh, this is
bad
going to be a
before they
feel good
get
movie.
worse.
I'm going to be
Yeah, no, But again, I think I can deal with it if I can get into the story where for me, I need to be constantly engaged in stuff, and my mentality is I like it to move, and that's not necessarily I don't think I'm right in that. That's just how I
Well,
process them.
again, going back to why I love it is I love that it doesn't move quick. I love that
Right.
it does sit in the scenes and lets the moments play out quietly. For me, that's what builds a lot of the atmosphere. For me, it's what builds a lot of what makes it the movie. What makes it Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance is that mood and tone and uh, pacing where it'll sit back in a wide shot and let the absurd thing happen, and it feels almost more absurd because it's not quickly cutting and you can just see it happening in the world. So much like Ryu being the green-haired guy who sticks out in a sea of other people, like you see the absurd thing happen in a just an otherwise still frame of just a when the big thing goes down, we're at like a lake. It's this very tranquil lake, but there's just this one absurd dark element happening in a small part of the frame, and it's that kind of that contrast that really
Yeah.
like plays it for me. But with that, I think we'll give the spoiler warning since we've danced around things quite a bit. So full spoilers for Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance if you've not seen it, or you don't care, or if you care about spoilers, of course. I'm a little bit tired, by the way. If I'm if I'm searching for my words a bit more than often, I'm a little bit tired. So
If you ever
bear
just
with
start
me.
wandering, I'll just poke you with the stick
Yeah.
and guide you back.
There's stick poking in this actually. There's a
There
scene with
is
some stick
plenty
poking.
of stick poking.
Yeah. So I love how kind of absurd the plot is. Basically, Ryu's sister is a kidney. She's very, very sick. There's even again going back to the quirky humor. She's like on the floor in pain, and she's like sort of moaning out in pain. She's like oh, and she's in pain.
Yeah.
And there's 4 guys who live next door, who think these are sex noises. So the camera like goes through the wall at one point, and all 4 guys are up against the wall masturbating. But the part about that's absurd enough as it is that 4 guys are in a row masturbating. But my favorite part. My favourite part is that one of them has like a picture of a naked lady taped to the back of one of his friends'
Of the
heads,
other guy.
so you can
Yeah.
look at the naked lady while he's
Because they're
masturbating.
in a row. Like they didn't like go to different parts of the room to do
No,
this.
no,
they're
But no,
they're
some
like
of
in
them,
a train.
some of them have like their hand on another person's shoulder in front of them.
Yeah.
It is like the most bizarre masturbation scene
Yeah.
I have
Because
seen.
you're set up for that early on when Ryu explains that it's their parents' house and it's an old house. The walls are thin, so they kind of But for him, it doesn't matter because he's deaf. That's not going to bother him.
Oh yeah, like, for him it wasn't a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then you get into that scene. I was just like, oh, okay. So that's what's going to happen. All right.
Yeah, well, it gives you the contrast. It's kind of setting up what the tone shifts are going to be during the movie. And then, I just said during or throughout. Pick your word. But,
Throughout.
yeah, throughout.
I thought you said throughout. So, that's just, it's fine.
I wasn't going to let myself away with it. I thought, you know what, no, I'm pointing that out. That was
There you
that
go.
was a mash of words. So, he's fired from work, right? And,
No, he's laid off. Like
oh, sure, yeah.
his whole division is.
Oh yeah,
is
he's not fired because he did something bad. He's just they're having
Right.
layoffs and they cut a bunch of people. But he's got just the money saved up for the operation, and then he's told that it'll probably take a long time for this kidney. So he actually sees a flyer for basically a black market kind of like kidney job, where he insists on going and getting his kidney taken out, even though we're told it's incompatible in another scene.
Well, yeah, I took that though as he was trading his kidney for one that would match.
Oh sure, yeah,
Because the doctor told him he needs, to be blood type B.
yeah.
Like he stresses that. So I thought he goes in here thinking, oh, one of mine for one of theirs, and everything will be good.
Yeah, because
But of course,
they pick him up, they take him to a location that's far away, and he pays them the money, and then he wakes up with naked, with he's stitched up, so his kidney's been removed, but he's been left there naked on his own. Everyone's abandoned him, and they've basically stolen his kidney and his money and ran for it. And then almost directly after that, I mean, we get this really absurd scene where he's on the side of the road trying to hitchhike, but he's butt naked. And not that it really makes a difference, I think, because I don't think I'd been more likely to pick up someone that doesn't have green hair, but the green hair just really makes it that bit more absurd, that there's a naked man with green hair at the side of the road trying to hitchhike. But he, almost immediately we get a scene at the doctor's where the doctor's like, oh, funny enough, this is like the luckiest thing ever, but we do actually have a donor. We never get one this quick. And you've got the money in your account, everything's good. And he looks like miserable, and the doctor's like, oh, you should be happy now. Why are you not happy?
Well, it's the way that the doctor talks to him as if he's dumb, like, and not in the mute sense. He's talking super loud and super deliberate, and so. But
that's the. But again, obviously he's sitting there. He's basically not reacting because he's in shock and he knows he's just screwed everything up. And then again, it cuts immediately to his girlfriend beating him up for it. She's like very comically, I might add. She's just like she's kicking him on the bed. You know, that money could have saved your sister. It's very very funny stuff. And again, a very really tragic way, but it's like, oh crap, so what are they going to do? And it's actually the girlfriend who talks him into, like, cause she just starts saying, oh, we should do this, and we can do this, and, like, you know, kidnapping, you know, everyone thinks kidnapping's bad, but that's because all the ones you hear about are, well, the kid dies. We're not going to do that, we're nice, we're just going to, you know.
Yeah, it'll be like a fun weekend, and, you know, and we're actually doing them a favor because we're taking the kid for the weekend, and you know, and it's for a good cause, so it's really not a crime. And this is how she's selling it to him, which I thought that was, again, you talk about the absurdity, just that entire argument that cracked me up.
And you know, they stake out the kid a little bit, and they even see like another disgruntled worker who's mad that or upset that he was laid off. Basically try and plead for his job back to the point where he starts cutting himself in front of him. Like, he sort of like he intentionally sort of gets hit by the car when it's moving slowly, and then gets up and he's got a knife. And one of the little thematic points is that the boss character Dong Jin, he gets like his hand sliced. He's trying to like take the knife off of him, obviously for obvious reasons, and he gets his hand sliced like down his hand. Which is there because it's relevant at the end of the movie because he gets sliced again, and I think there's a thematic point that's made with that. But he so that sets up the idea, and like this actually makes Ryu kind of nervous. He's like, hey, like, and obviously all in sign language. He's like, hey, I'm like the obvious person to do this. I got laid off. They're going to like call me into question me like first. It's like fine. Don't concern yourself with it, right? It's fine. It's basically her attitude. But they kidnap the kid, and one of the interesting things I think this movie does is that it doesn't necessarily feel the need to explain certain things at various points. It's like it's a movie, except that they've kidnapped her. It just kind of cuts because it cuts to like. Ryu and his girlfriend kind of like, you know, they're singing songs and like skipping or whatever, and then the kid comes into frame and she's also there. It's like, oh shit, they've done it. They've actually went and done it. And it's like you don't necessarily need to see and that's something they could have done. Like the choice could have been made. Oh, let's have a 10 sequence of them actually getting the girl.
Yeah, I mean, but it's not a caper. Like that's not the point of this movie. Like had this been, you know, a heist style, and it's all about the kidnapping. But at the end of the day, it kind of is about the kidnapping, but it's not, if that makes sense. Like, it's about the fallout from the kidnapping.
Yeah, it's not about the actual act of the kidnapping. Because they actually just trick the girl. They basically just say, oh, we're keeping you over the weekend because your dad's busy. You know, they lie to her.
We're babysitting.
Because she spends her time watching cartoons and drawing and stuff. It's not like she's being held in a room in chains.
Again, there's no bag over her head. They're not being mean to her. It's actually the most compassionate kidnapping I've ever seen on film.
In fact, to get a good photograph to send the dad for the ransom demand, he has to intentionally try and make her cry because she looks too happy. He makes her this necklace and then offers it to her, and then like says, no, you can't have that, and that makes her cry. And then he runs around the room with a Polaroid camera trying to like snap a photo while she's crying, which is again the most absurd thing ever. Like the most absurd task is him running around the room trying to get a photo of her crying. But he eventually does, and then he makes her happy again by giving her the necklace back.
Right.
But
because kids are simple. I mean, that's it.
They are simple. Kids are very simple. So But no, so that's the whole thing. But basically, the sister is also lied to. The sister thinks that the kid's just staying because it's the friend. But she ends up finding his layoff slip basically for his like severance pay, and she phones his work and finds out about what's happening, and realizes that the kid's been kidnapped, and basically the ransom drop's going all off, and the dad's come, he's paying the money, and they've left him tied up, but. I actually really like the scene where Ryu comes home and he's super happy because despite the way he's gotten the money, you can't help but be happy for him that he's finally kind of pulled it off and he's got the suitcase full of money. Yeah, because
he's gonna save his sister. Like this is it. He's got this money back, and
yeah, and we know the kid's not harmed. The kid's not been having a bad time. The kid's fine. So,
and we're about to reach the end of the movie, and it's a happy ending for everybody, right?
And I even because they even have this chemistry where they're fighting because he changes the channel because he comes in and the girl's watching some cartoons and she's having some fun, and he changes the channel like I don't know a sports on. He's hockey or something, and she kind of fakes the remote out of him. And she actually sits on top of him. He's lying down on his back, and she just sits on his stomach and turns it back to cartoons. And then he crosses his feet, he crosses his legs, and she just kind of leans on his knees like that. And it's like really kind of adorable. It's like they actually has chemistry with the kid. It's fine.
Almost becomes a Pixar movie.
And yeah, he almost does. He's almost like or not Pixar. I'm thinking almost like Big Hero. He's Baymax almost to this kid.
Yeah, along those lines.
But you're just kind of waiting. It's like this is too happy. Something bad has happened. Something bad is about to shake this.
And that's where you go because you like the bad feelings, and I'm going.
Well, it's not
Mr. Vengeance. Is he now? Does he go and get vengeance on the guys that stole his kidney? Is that where this is going?
Which does happen. That's also a part of the movie.
Yeah. So, but this is where I'm at this point in the movie because we're almost at the not quite the halfway point, but we're coming up on that. So I know from just the runtime, you're right. Like it's not close to over.
Oh yeah, sure.
But yeah.
It's not so much that I go to the dark place, it's more that this is just kind of like script writing 101. It's the same in a TV show. Whenever two characters who are like in a relationship seem too happy, it's because something's about to break them up. Something bad is about to happen.
Which then, leaks into the real world where you think that everything's going great, you wait for the shoe to drop,
Yeah. But it's just writing 101 because it's going to hit the hardest when everyone's happy. And the kid pulls out a note and he looks at it and it's basically like, kidnapping's an awful thing. Please give her back immediately. This is my dying wish. And he runs up in panic and he goes in and she's in the bath. Blood's everywhere. She's dead. And it's this really sad thing. And he goes out to this place, this lake, to bury her in stones. And do you know what I love? I love that this is never like outright stated, but it's kind of implied that this is probably a place they like to be as kids, because at one point he mentions that he's not been here since he was a kid, and he remembers the water being over his head, but it's actually really shallow for him. Which I love that point, because ultimately the girl falls in the water and drowns because she can't swim, and it's this beautiful shot where he's burying his sister, and she's behind him screaming for help, but he can't hear it.
He can't hear because he's deaf. Yeah.
And again,
and that's rough. That was a rough watch.
And the whole thing is that he and this is obviously being deaf's not his fault, but it's standing in for the idea that he's so focused on his own needs and his own things that he's oblivious to the rest of the world. He thinks he can get away with a kidnapping and have no consequences, and this is what's happening behind him. It is such a great shot. Again, it's one of those great quiet moments where she's running on the little bridge thing going across the water. Yeah. And then it cuts to him, and you don't see her anymore. It's just quiet. And where is she? And then eventually you see her just like, and this is what I was talking about, where the entire frame is this very serene, tranquil, beautiful nature setting. He's in the front of the middle of the camera, middle of the frame, like mourning his sister. It's this beautifully somber moment, very quiet, very peaceful, and you can just see her in the background waving her arms, like in the small part, just struggling and dying. And then it does a harsh cut to her just floating in the water, and it's like as she's dead, and it's too late. But by the time he realizes it's too late, I think scenes like this are handled so well and get across the intended emotion. For me, it like this is the part of the movie where it starts to just like work completely, and it's just starting to blow out the water. No pun intended. But it's great. And I think there's a mentally disabled person who kind of shows up in the movie at this point. And it's a very sort of random appearance seemingly at first, but I think there's a lot of representation here because he kind of, as Ryu's burying his sister, and he's one by one. He's not just shoveling rocks onto her. He one by one he's placing rocks onto her body, and he's just kind of doing it slowly and very meaningfully. And this disabled person comes up, and he's got this kind of stance where his hands always kind of like reached out, and he starts like awkwardly picking up rocks and throwing them away, and Ryu has to kind of scare him off to stop him from doing it. And I kind of like the idea that Ryu's trying to cover up what he's done, and again, and this person almost represents just no matter how clean and neat you think it is, the world's going to keep interfering, and it's going to uncover what you've done.
Well, it's kind of like karma, for lack of a better term. It's the world will right itself. You're not, there's no free lunches in nature. You're gonna have to pay for this. Because
I mean, right after this, it's the disabled person who goes over to the car and pokes the girl with a stick. It freaks the girl out a bit that's what makes her run out the car and go onto the bridge. So he kind of indirectly, in a way, causes the consequences as well.
Yeah, because the disabled guy is trying to grab her necklace that he made for her.
Yeah.
At that point too, and had Ryu been able to hear or anything, this whole situation doesn't occur, right? Because
had he not kidnapped a girl, this entire situation doesn't occur, which is kind of the point.
Well, yeah, too. But I'm just going in smaller steps. But he's responsible for everything that happens. Like, there's no question about that.
And the whole thing's beautiful because there's that great moment because it cuts to like subtitles to what he's thinking because he can't say them out loud, or he can't have. It's almost like there's narration, but he can't speak, so they have like.
Right.
They have like just like text. The screen goes black and it's just the big captions on the screen and nothing else. And he jumps in the water and it's like ankle high, and that's when he says, "Oh, I've not been here since I was a child." And there's an extra irony in that as well, of course. That this wasn't even enough to like kill him. This was only enough to. This water's only high enough to kill a child.
Right.
And there's just that extra tinge of like just dark irony there. And he goes and gets the body, and it's like super. It's super sad. You feel the tragedy in the scene because he cares. He's not. This does not hit him lightly that he just like let this child die. Like he's like obviously distraught by it. And this is where we actually shift the movie. We shift the movie largely over to the father, Dong-jin, who's with the police. He's at the crime scene, and again, it's the quiet awkwardness of him standing there staring as they're like pulling her body out of the water. They're doing these various things. The detective's asking, "Is there anyone you've ever wronged?" And of course, there's other elements as well of in small ways that things of like because at one point they again this is a little coincidental thematically, but it works really well. Is the detective's kid's actually sick, and the amount he needs to like give the kid the operation is the exact same amount that Ryu needed for his sister. And he's on the phone to his wife, and he's like, I'm just almost, at least our kid's not been kidnapped and murdered, because, like, we're not rich, that's almost a lucky thing, we're poor, so no one comes after us. And again, kind of in the circumstantial way a little bit, because Dong-jin never seems like a bad guy, necessarily. He's just kind of the boss, and he has to lay people off, and it seems very villainous. But he doesn't really seem to have much of a choice in it. When the guy comes to like with the knife earlier on, he's like, sorry, I explained it to you at the time. Like, that just has to happen. Like the company's failing.
It's not personal. It's just, hey, this is what we need to do to recoup losses, and it goes on. He's very that business minded.
I think what it's doing though is that it's showing that much like Ryu being deaf and how that kind of affects various things, it's showing that almost by circumstance, because of his position, it makes him this target. It makes him this person that people are going to see as different. Again, that alienation. He's not just one of the regular people. He's one of the rich people. Therefore, they see him as someone to exploit, or someone who they don't feel guilty about doing something to, because they see him as that instead of just being a person. And I think that thematically really works. And of course it gets very dark as well, because later on he remembers the knife incident with the guy who worked for him, and they go to his house to question him. Why he goes with the police to question him, I don't know. Different police procedures in Korea, perhaps. I'm not sure. But they go to the house, and the entire family's committed suicide. because they couldn't afford. He's got like 3 or 4 kids, and they couldn't afford to live because he's not got his job, and they're all dead except one kid. One kid's still breathing, and it's actually Dong Jin who goes down and like listens to him in tears. He's still breathing,
Right.
and you see him running down. He's got the kid on his back, and he's running down in the rain, and he's trying desperately to save this kid because maybe he can save him. And it's the idea that he feels guilt for this, that he's in some way responsible. He didn't care about this guy's kid, and now his kid's been kidnapped and killed, and no one else seems to care. So he's trying desperately to be the one there to help. And we see him at the
because he's also under the frame of mind, like, he doesn't know that Ryu was gonna drop the kid back off after they buried the sister. So it looks like they got the ransom, and then just offed her.
It looks more vicious at first than it is. But that's the thing, though. By the end of the film, he knows this. Because, I mean, just to skip ahead, when he gets him in the water at the end, because he takes him back out to where she died to kill him, he says, "I know you're not a bad person, but you understand why I have to do this."
Have to do this, yeah.
Because by that point in the movie, I think he believes him when he says, when Ryu says it wasn't intentional, we didn't mean for it to happen. I think he's seen enough evidence, and he just believes him, that he's like, yeah, no, I believe you, but this has to happen. Right. And I think because he understands that all the extreme things he did to try and get a kidney, and then that put him in this hard bit of luck that led to his sister. I think he understands that he understands why he's partly responsible in a way, even if it wasn't his choice, even if it was not vindictive or anything like that. But he understands why he played a part in it. But again, it's this idea that again, violence begets violence. This leads to Dong Jin wanting revenge and hunting both the girlfriend and him down.
Well, yeah, and then he falls into the kind of same cycle as Ryu. They're parallel characters.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
He's mindset on the one thing. He doesn't care what else he does to get there. And there's a lot of great tense scenes of there's actually, talking about them mirroring each other. There's a scene where they're both waiting at each other's places. They're both waiting at each other's houses.
Yep.
For them to show up, and just to make it clear how similar they both are in their vengeance. Because by this point as well, Dong Jin's killed the girlfriend. He's actually went to the girlfriend, and he's basically tortured and electrocuted her for information, and he's killed her. And again, it's really absurd. She already ordered takeout food, and it arrives, and he's eating it in front of her. And she's actually, because she's been electrocuted, she starts, her piss basically starts flowing down the floor. And he takes the sheet that was over her head, puts it on the floor, and then when she wakes up a bit and starts talking, he puts that same sheet back over her head. And throughout all this, he's eating her food. It's very absurd, but it's very he doesn't care. He just wants his information. He's just hell bent on the one thing. His mind is set. Just like how Ryu was set in saving his sister. But once she's dead, and by the way, one of my favourite moments in the film is Ryu comes back to her place, and all the police are there. There's an ambulance there. There's everyone's here to deal with the crime scene. She's been taken into the elevator, and the stretcher, the elevator's not big enough for the stretcher to be in, and he's in the elevator kind of by chance. They have to put the stretcher up against the back of the elevator wall so it can fit with everyone else, and the sheet kind of falls down, and he sees it's her, because I think he suspects it obviously, but this is where he sees her, and no one else in the elevator knows that it's him, and knows that they're connected in some way.
They're together.
And he actually there's just that still shot where he's looking over. He's got the cap on and he's just kind of looking over and he's staring at her. And I love he is feeling such intense emotions, but no one else in the room is even noticing.
Right.
Which again is kind of like almost a representation of the entire film. That he is feeling this intense thing. His sister's dying. He needs to get her help, and no one else cares. That is this scene in a nutshell in the elevator. It's beautiful. And he even holds her hand as well, but no one's, just sort of slyly, he kind of holds her hand a little bit. It's very sad. And this makes him want revenge on Dong Jin. Again, cycle. We're back to the cycle.
Yeah.
And it just so happens that Dong Jin's the one who gets the one up on him. And, he rigs his door so he'd be electrocuted when he goes to open it. Because they set up that he started off as an engineer. He's good with his hands. He can do this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's really neat.
Yeah.
And his actual death, by the way, is really cringe-worthy, because he takes him out to the lake, and he goes under the water and cuts the back of his ankles, and you see him bleeding out from the back of his ankle. Which, by the way, just being cut in the back of your ankles is
it's the Achilles tendon. And from what I've heard, that's one of the most painful things when that goes. There's like no other pain like it from
It looks
and
painful.
yeah, and the fact that he's in the water, so he can still kind of support himself, but not really. Even adds to that, like
Yeah,
he's
because
being forced to
obviously
stand.
he's bleeding out, but eventually he's going to be able to not stand and he'll drown.
Right?
That's kind of the idea. It's to make him feel
Yeah,
helpless. That's
exactly.
the idea, and it's really great. But again, there's consequences. Everything that happens in this movie has consequences, and you don't really believe her at the time. But his girlfriend, when she's being tortured, she says, "Hey, I'm part of this like terrorist group, and if anything happens to me, they will kill you." And it sounds like she's bluffing because she's the way she says it's like they'll kill
Yeah,
you, absolutely 100%. Like, the way she phrases it, it sounds like she's bluffing.
yeah. Well, and throughout the whole movie, you see her holding that like she's passing out like anti-capitalist propaganda,
Yeah.
and so you're like, okay, well, she's already an odd duck as it is. Is she just bluffing? Because we haven't heard about this group really any other time.
Yeah,
You
but at the
know?
end of the movie, they all like, drive up in the cars
Yep.
and they come out, and there's like a thematic thing where she's smoking the entire movie,
Yeah.
and then like all these guys who come out of the car are all smoking, and kind of in the same way, if that makes any sense. But they
Associate
are.
them. Well, yeah, but it associates her with them.
Yeah, it's just a little link, just to sort of let you know. They make it very clear, of course. You hear a little bit of the dialogue from earlier, where she says, "If anything happens to me, they'll come after you." Uh,
Yep.
and they come after him with knives. Like it's like three of them just like sort of surround him and stab him, and he tries to fight them off. And again, this is what makes it thematically call back to that earlier knife attack with the disgruntled worker, is that he actually tries to grab the knife at one point, and it's with the other hand he gets it slit. So again, much like before, actions that he did have led to someone coming at him with a knife. And
Yep.
I like that thematic link that again it's his actions that have led to this. And he's looking down at his hand, and you see the sort of the scar of the first one, and then in this hand it's actually got the fresh cut, and it's like, oh, it's happened again. I
Yeah.
really like that. It's really good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's left there dying with a message like stabbed
No,
into his chest.
yeah, that's pretty brutal. And it's at the same place, right? Because that's where he. It looks like he was just dismembering Ryu's body,
Yeah, no,
and
yeah,
it's right out. It's right outside that lake or river, whatever that was, and it's kind of poetic at the end that Ryu and his sister rejoined at that spot. You know.
yeah, no, it
Uh,
is. And I kind of, I like the just the idea of consequences, because like
mhm.
everyone who acts inappropriately in this film gets consequences, because the girlfriend is the one who actually talks him into doing the
Yeah.
kidnapping,
Yeah.
and she gets consequences, but Dong Jin falls off the high horse, if you will, if you want to even call it that,
Right.
but he participates in revenge. He gets consequences. It's like if you fall down this path, it just leads to hell. Like it just leads to
Yeah, it only leads to heartache,
yeah.
and
Um,
even the black market group, Ryu gets his revenge
exactly.
on
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. They
He shows up. Oh man,
yeah,
I really like that part.
for what they did, they get their comeuppance, they get their revenge, and we see that they're just deplorable characters. Like not only are they
Yeah,
stealing kidneys, apparently if the subject it happens to be female, the two brothers,
yeah,
because it's like a mum and two kids, and I say
yeah,
kids, they're adults, but they're the ones who do this, and if it happens to be a woman, they'll rape the woman when she's unconscious,
yeah,
because there's
yeah,
and you don't even realize what he's talking about, because we see him go back in and he's went and got like an ice cream cake, but in like a frozen container, which is presumably for the organ they're going to take, and
yep,
he comes in, he's like, hey, you said I could go first, and that's when Ryu attacks with a baseball bat because he's followed him back to their place. But when he comes
yeah,
in, the other brother's just like, he's got his pants down and the woman's naked on
yeah.
the table, and it's like, Jesus Christ, what did they do to him when he was unconscious?
Exactly,
Makes you wonder.
exactly. And then you see Ryu out of batting cage throughout different parts of the movie, and
Mm.
so it sets that up that he knows how to swing a bat. And then even when he deals with this family and the police show up, they're just like, this couldn't have been one guy. Like the size of these guys, and 3-on-1, it just doesn't make sense. But we know because we saw it that he took him out, and just the one guy that so he stabs the one dude in the jugular basically, and then goes and grabs
Well,
the other brother,
with a screwdriver. I want to point out it was a
the
screwdriver he
screwdriver.
stabbed them with.
Yeah. And so it's in there, and the mom's like, you can't touch it, you can't pull it out because it's an artery. If you do it, that's it. But as this guy's worrying about his neck, Ryu goes and grabs the other brother that he's already beaten half to death, and proceeds to just smash his head in with the bat in front of these two.
Well,
And
that's the
yeah,
thing.
it's
Not
so
not.
brutal.
This is the thing. It's not even just strictly revenge for stealing his kidney. It's revenge because they set this whole thing into. He blames
Yeah,
them for the girl's death because if they hadn't
right,
done this to him, he wouldn't have went and kidnapped the girl. And
right.
that's obviously like that's him transferring blame of something that I mean,
Yeah, well, of
like
course.
sure, yeah, it was a domino effect, but like you still made the choice
Well, yeah,
afterwards.
and to him, it's more righteous because they are the legit bad guys. You know,
Oh
like
yeah, yeah.
he is writing like if fate was getting him back with the drowning of the girl, then this is him trying to recourse correct by taking these guys out.
Yeah,
You know, so
obviously we see how there's sympathy in both sides of the main
yeah,
two characters. There's no sympathy for these characters. These characters, no,
no,
these are just awful people. Like, you're not against this. This is
oh, you cheer it.
this is kind of painting Ryu as maybe being able to fight off Dongjin. They're both seen as capable of what they're doing, but
Mhm,
ultimately Dongjin is the smarter one and wins because he sets a trap.
mhm.
And so that's what I was going to say earlier on. Actually, when I was mentioning the scene where they're both staking out the other person's place, at one
Yeah,
point, Dongjin like sort of like cracks his neck, and it cuts mid crack to Ryu also cracking his neck. Like they're both doing the exact same thing. They're the same in a lot of ways, and I think that dichotomy is really played with in the second half of the movie. But and I love the little touches. I love like the guilt from Ryu. I love that there's a couple of moments where we're not focusing on him, but we see him at the hospital when the girl's getting cremated. We see him around because he cares. He's listening. He wants to know
yeah.
like the
What
outcomes of
happened?
these things. And I think in his mind, like if he gets revenge on the kidney, you know,
Thieves.
the kidney nappers,
Yeah.
the kidney kidnappers. If he gets revenge on them, like that'll not right the wrongs, but that'll, yeah, as you
No.
say, he thinks that's the just thing to do. Um,
Right.
but yeah,
Well, it goes back to Batman Begins and Justice versus Vengeance, right? What's the
mm,
difference? You know, that they seem parallel, but really they're not. So, and Ryu and Dong Jin learned that the hard way.
yeah. But that's the sad thing, though. I don't think he cares by the end of the movie. I think he's accepting
Yeah.
that he's dying for it.
Yeah.
He has to do it. It goes back to that emotion, and I think that's what the movie does really well. Is that you completely buy into why both of them are doing what they're doing. Once the vengeance really comes into play, you understand the motivations of both characters, uh, and it works. And it's you know yeah, because I think Dongjin kind of tries to accept his part in maybe why some things are happening, but ultimately he kind of shuns that because at the end of the movie he gets a phone call from the hospital and they're like, oh, the kid who was here, he died, and they've been thinking all movie, oh, are you the kid's father because you brought him in,
Yeah.
and when they say he's dead, instead of like going to the hospital and saying I'll take care of this, he just says you got the wrong number and he hangs up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and it feels cold. It feels really cold because
Mhm.
he's gotten
Well,
his
he's
revenge
resigned to
now.
his fate.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's like it's like, well, I don't care anymore. It's
Well,
uh,
it was almost as if that was his attempt to do good, and it backfired. Whereas Ryu's attempt to do good is successful. You know,
well,
by
no,
taking out
because the
the
way I
kidney
see it
thieves.
is it's a thematic consequence because he went through with his revenge because he went down the dark path.
Yeah.
The kid died. Which I know logically that there's no, they're not related, but I think thematically
No.
that's
Yeah.
because he didn't do good because I think in the second half of the movie that is the dichotomy for his character where he is helping the kid, he's doing the right thing by this kid by trying to help and paying for his hospital
Right.
bills, but he takes the dark path instead. Like he almost does the right thing, but he goes down the dark path. He makes the wrong choice to go down the path of vengeance, and because of that, the consequence, other than his direct death by the hands of the 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 terrorist organization,
Yeah.
because he went down the dark path, the karma then comes into play, and the child's dead because that was the hope. It was almost like his conscience was on life support with the child.
Right.
Like
Right.
his good intentions were on life support with the kid, and they died with the kid because he went through with the revenge, and he's lost himself because of that. He's lost
Yeah.
his innocence, just like Ryu had. and then he dies. So yeah, it's a very tragic film. Everyone, like all of our main characters die. All of our main characters die in very vicious ways. And yeah, and it starts with good intentions and childlike innocence, and it is slowly stripped away throughout the film. But if it's not clear, I love this a lot.
Yeah, I can tell.
Because another little point I like, just to show how much Dongjin's changed, when they go to the autopsy of the girl, and you don't see much of it, but they're in they're in the morgue, and
Yeah.
and he's watching it, and he's really uncomfortable. He's looking away. He's fidgeting. You really tell that he is distraught about this. But when he finds the sister, because he finds the sister's body in the rocks, and then it cuts to a scene in the morgue where they're doing an autopsy on her, and he's just staring intently. He is not uncomfortable. He is just fixated on what is happening, what is going on, who is she? Tell me what you can. And it shows you how much he's changed from that first autopsy to that second autopsy, because his entire demeanor's changed between the two scenes. So again, there's a lot of little touches like that. There's a lot of little beats and scenes that just play into what the characters are going through. And then just simple things, like I said at the start of the movie, Ryu helps the homeless man, and then halfway through the movie, after the girl's died, at one point it cuts back to that homeless man sitting in the same like sort of like it's like an old sofa that's just been disregarded on the side of the road, and he's sitting there with his pants down, and there's no one there to help him. He's just there on his own. And then, in fact, even just to get really symbolic, it cuts to like there's actually the couch has been there so long. There's like little flowers growing out the back of the cushions, and I like there's like a little pretty flower, and I just thought, oh, that's like a nice little like, you know, Ryu was that flower, but now he's not there anymore. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff there. Like, but both these men were forces for good in some way, and they could have been, but they chose the path of vengeance. They chose the path of violence, and it literally accomplished nothing but more death and pain.
I agree. I mean, that's what I picked up on it, and that's what I mean. Just the whole second part. That's what really, you know, what I enjoyed was the dichotomy of the characters, was seeing their parallel journeys and knowing like they're only gonna one up each other. Like one thing's only gonna lead to another bad thing, as Dongjin's going after the girlfriend, and then, you know, how is Ryu gonna retaliate for that now? You know, and it goes in a little bit different direction than I was expecting, but that's what resonated with me, was their story, how it kind of is intertwined.
Yeah. All right. Well, do you want to rate the film then? Are we wrapping up?
Yeah.
All right. Right, go on then. You rate it first.
Yeah. So I mean, you know, I had problems with this movie, and I don't think it's bad, but I didn't enjoy it either. So it's a 6 out of me.
Okay. Straight 9 for me. I love the film. I think it's funny because Old Boy's the one that gets all the praise. Old Boy's the one that everyone talks about. And I love Old Boy, and I do think Old Boy is an even better movie. And I saw Old Boy first, and I think most people probably see Old Boy first because it's the one that everyone hears about. But then once you see it, you go, oh, what's this guy's other films? Oh, it's part of a kind of a trilogy, thematically speaking.
Well, yeah, now I have to finish the trilogy.
Watch Lady Vengeance. And I think because of that, this one kind of gets overlooked a little bit, and I think it's a crying shame because I think it's fantastic. I think it's a beautifully made film. It's very confident. It's very intentional, paced. It bounces around sort of the dark, absurd humor of what's going on. It's not afraid to go, yeah, this guy's trying to get a kidney for his sister on the black market. This is kind of absurd. Let's treat it with a bit of absurdity, but you always feel the emotion in the scenes as it's doing it, and you feel the intentions behind it. And for me, it creates this wonderful concoction of like conflicting emotions that work really well. I think that's actually one of the things that I love about foreign films, is I feel like there's certain tones and vibes that I think mainstream like US films just never. I mean, they probably could pull it off if they really tried, but they don't. Like they go for different things, and that's fine. But it makes it it gives it that, beyond just having a different language and in different locations. It really is what makes it feel like unique and different.
It has a different texture to it.
Yeah,
you know.
So no, I highly praise Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. I love it a lot. So, But that's been Overload, which was slightly late this month actually. Matt had to track down the copy. It took a little bit longer than usual.
Yeah, this was tough to find, but I found it and I watched it, and that's what's important.
Which means actually the vote. I've not actually checked, but the voting for the next Overload will already be finished. The options for that were Chef from you, and I put in a classic, something very different. Matt, you'll be happy to hear. I put in Witness for the Prosecution, which is a
good. I've already seen that.
Oh, excellent. So, I assume you liked it then.
Yeah, well, we'll get there. We'll get there. Wins.
All right, okay.
Because I have a story that I can regale.
We may get there. We'll see how the vote went. But that's actually one of the things that are changing about Overload. It's a very simple little change, but basically it was getting really difficult to try and find movies that the other person hadn't seen. Yeah. So it'll just be movies we love that we pick, and then the other person might not have seen them, and that's okay.
Although I do have a list of certain things that Pete hasn't seen, so going forward now, that I can still,
Actually, that's worth mentioning. Matt was actually almost... He didn't know that we did Mean Girls on Influx, and that it was a vault pick.
So mad.
Because he was like, that was going to be one of my Overload picks. And basically... but that's the thing, though. Our patrons picked it. They like, multiple people put it in the vault.
And I did not know that.
So...
I didn't know it was a vault movie. It looked like it was just a movie that Connor bullied you into watching.
No. I relatively enjoyed it, Matt. So
it's a fun movie. So
what can you say? I mean, we should do a remake of it called Sympathy for. Because there's a revenge element to that movie. There's definitely
a very big revenge element. Yeah. I've never seen it in the theater, gasp, and I will never forget that. So,
oh dear. But yeah, so that is Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance. By all means, let us know what you thought of it in the comments below. Like, subscribe, all the usual stuff. Get us on Twitters at mailed_fuzz for channel updates. If you want to support the channel, of course, head over to patreon.com/mailfuzztv. There's a link in the description. We mentioned that at the start, of course. That's how these episodes happen. Our patrons vote between the two movies that we pick, one of whom we love. And yeah, so that is this month's episode. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and we'll see you next time.